All right, we are live. Hello again, everybody. I'm Dr. Laura Sicola, your host of Vocal Impact Productions, and are Speaking to Influence podcast. Today, we're on Podcast Live, and I'm bringing to you for our East Coast Happy Hour two guests who have already been on my show. And if you're already subscribed, then you will know that Ellen Weber is up there. Ellen, you can wave hi. You're up in the upper right-hand corner there. And Ellen was my very first podcast guest. So she was a friend. She is a colleague. She was a guinea pig for me. She's a guinea pig again to me. See, this is how you know that she is a tech junkie. She's a tech guru. She knows all things and likes playing with tech because she's willing to play with me. I know my way and stumble my way through all this technology. But she has terrific insights to offer as far as building a business, building a platform, building what you need to build. And the other person who is all about building is Lisa Peskin, who was just my guest about 2 weeks ago in episode 14. And Lisa is the founder of and CEO of Business Development University. And I'm sorry, Ellen is the executive director of Robin Hood Ventures, as well as I want to get this right, the innovation and all done with Temple University, formerly of Temple University, now 100% with Robin Hood Ventures, which is an angel venture organization. And so between building organizations, building through sales, this happy hour is all about building. So anybody out there, feel free to chime in the chat box. We hope you'll be asking questions. And this is also why you want to make sure that before the end of the episode, this is the one time you're allowed to multitask. Otherwise, we don't normally encourage multitasking, but we want you to go to iTunes. We want you to subscribe to the podcast. We want you to rate us, give us a 5-star rating. We like 5 stars best. We like things that sparkle, like stars. And be sure to review the podcast as well. And then download all those episodes so that you have a chance to listen to them on the go at your convenience, because that's where you're going to hear people like Ellen and like Lisa. Earlier today, we had Mitzi Perdue, whose episode just launched this morning. And later tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. West Coast is where we'll have our West Coast happy hour. And that's where Michael Houlihan, who was one of the co-founders of Barefoot Wines and the co-founder of Business Audio Theater, will be joining us to talk then. But for now, Ellen and Lisa, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
So what was it like being on the receiving end of the podcast? How's it to be a guest on all that kind of craziness? It's very different from your standard, just business as usual kind of mode.
It's a little scary.
What's scary about it? See, this is important because people are always concerned about trying something that's not in the comfort zone. So talk to me about that.
You want to be as pithy as possible. And, it's one thing when you're on a panel and you can kind of self-correct. When you're on a podcast, I just felt a little extra pressure to be pithy. So I think we got through it.
We definitely got through it. You actually have the record for the shortest episode because you are so concise and straightforward in your episodes. And that's, with podcasting, sometimes that's actually in the best interest because people are more likely to when they're just looking for something quick, then they'll go to those short episodes. And so you've got both of you are two of my highest rated podcasts so far as consistently high numbers. So, clearly the content was terrific, length irrespective. What do you think, Lisa?
Well, it's so interesting you asked, because if you had spoken with the Lisa that was 18 years old and having to do something like that, I would have gotten myself into a major tizzy. But now, doing podcasts, doing interviews, although I don't love listening to myself or seeing myself, I love doing it. So I thrive on these opportunities. And through this whole COVID thing, I've been listening to so many podcasts. And there's some that, I'm listening to on a very fast speed and I get through the whole episode. And some people I'm kind of cutting short. So my whole goal when I did the podcast with you is that people would listen to the end of the podcast.
Yes. So it's all about great content, but it's also about delivery, right? And this is a big part of what I'm teaching in everything that I do. It's that balance of what you say and how you say it that makes you really listenable, that makes you engaging, that makes people buy into you and want to hear more. And I think both of you have done such an incredibly good job with that. Lisa, I'm curious to poke a little more at something that you said in there. What is it that you love about it? Because you went from somebody who hated public speaking of any sort, was super shy, and now you just said that you actually love being on podcasts. Why?
That's a great question. So I think it comes down to this. When I went into business in 2003, one of my mentors said, go into business to try to help as many people as you possibly can.
Okay.
And it's been in my mind over and over again. So I feel like anytime I get the opportunity to speak and meet new people and have them hear some of my thoughts and philosophies, even if they just get a little something out of what I say, then I feel like, what if God forbid something happens to me tomorrow? At least I've had an impact on as many people as possible.
I couldn't agree with Lisa anymore. It is one of the reasons why I do panels and podcasts and things like that, because if I can help a founder, with their company, if I can help someone figure out the key to get funding, then I feel like I've accomplished something. And so that's a very important reason to do this. Certainly not for personal publicity or anything like that. It's really to help people. The more successful founders we have, the more successful companies we have grow, the better the economy is, the better, people can take care of their families, all those good things. So that's definitely the motivating factor.
So Ellen, how did you get into angel investing? Like who wakes up in the morning and says, angel investing? Yeah, that sounds good. Most people don't even know what that is. So tell people real quick, what's the difference between angel investing versus VCs or venture capital or some other form of investment? What is it you guys do?
Okay, well, I'll answer the second question first. What's the difference between angel investing and venture capital investing? So venture capitalists create a fund. It's and other people invest in their fund, and venture capitalists are experts in a particular industry, or they have a thesis into which they invest, but they're investing other people's money. And so their goal is to get good returns for the people who have invested in them. And oftentimes the people who are investing, it's not individuals. It's more like it's kind of heavy lifting. It's pension funds and organizations like that. So they are stewards of other people's money. And the way they do that is by investing in companies and helping the companies grow. Angel investing is individuals writing checks to companies. Now at Robinhood, we invest as a partnership, so people come together, we write one check, but it's their own money. And so it's money that they could, it could be spent on philanthropy. It's money that could be spent on, a summer house or a boat or something like that. But instead, it's money that they are putting into a company to help a company grow. And most angel investors they want to make money, but it's not money first. It's usually trying to help grow companies and help new entrepreneurs succeed.
That's so interesting. And it's funny because, you and I have been working together for how many years with doing pitch coaching for different startup competitions and those kinds of things. And I knew of a certain difference. I never knew that degree of difference. I don't think I understood that the VCs were investing other people's money in the way that you described it. So hopefully everybody else out there just got an education in that kind of investment too. So then what made you say, that's what I want to do? I'm going to run Robinhood Ventures and I'm going to be the head angel. Who knew?
Well, I wasn't the head angel at first. So back in 99, I had quit my corporate job. I was very kind of, back in those days, you didn't always admit that you were working from home. I wanted to work from home. Right. And I had a consulting firm that I was helping to grow. And a couple of, close friends of mine decided they wanted to start an angel group. They were better on the front end of working with the entrepreneurs, helping to create deal flow, select companies, et cetera. But running a group of people, running a meeting, that sort of thing wasn't quite their bailiwick. And it actually was mine. I did a lot of work on group dynamics and meeting management and project management, that sort of thing. So I was kind of like the back office person when we started, and it was a ton of fun. But then over time, I just got more and more involved, and here we are 20 some years later, and I'm here full time for the first time. So I'm super, super excited about that because it'll let me our group has grown from the original 13 people to we're 65 now. We invest about $4 million a year. We've got a portfolio of 30 some companies. We've invested in, we're about to do our 82nd investment. So just, it's been total, and just meeting and working with the entrepreneurs has been so much fun.
And most of the entrepreneurs that you're working with are all in the tech space, typically, aren't they? Like med tech or educational tech or
generally
along those lines. Yeah. So you've got your niche as well. It's not like anybody who wants to open an ice cream stand or
correct. It's scalable businesses.
Right. Okay, that's great. And Lisa, how about you? So you clearly were never into the spotlight, and now you're running sales trainings and helping others build their company on a different level. So tell me about who you're working with.
Well, who I'm working with is a lot of manufacturers, a lot of companies in the tech space, a lot of insurance companies. Typically, the higher price tickets, the higher the average sale, mostly business to business, although we do a lot of work with banks as well. But for some reason, financial, manufacturing, business services. And then, of course, we work with a lot of non-selling professionals and help them, lawyers, accountants, architects, engineers, consultants, anyone that's responsible for either a sales or business development role or the folks that are leading those folks.
Got it. So with everything that's been going on nowadays, I think, Ellen, you mentioned the irony of back in the day, nobody wanted to admit that they were working from home. It's like, do you have a job? You don't really work, right? You're just, Sure, you're working from home. Sure, we all know what that means. And now, look, everybody's working from home, right? Whether or not they wanted to or imagine that they would. How has this whole new reality of the work from home world and COVID-19, et cetera, how has that impacted your businesses?
Lisa, you want to go first?
Sure. So it has impacted. Immediately, certain clients, they froze their budgets, right? And since these sales reps are used to going out and going to networking events and meeting with people, they really spend a lot of time like, what do I do now? And I wrote a blog recently, and it was get rid of the apostrophe T. So instead of focusing on what we can't do right now, let's focus on what we can do right now, because there is so much that salespeople could be doing right now. And what I'm finding, nobody likes the word cold calling, or nobody wants to do cold calling, but we still need to do prospecting. We still need to figure out how we're going to fill the pipeline with good qualified opportunities on a consistent basis. So the reality of the situation is we've got to get much better at this, right? So it's, meeting people, having virtual cups of coffee or happy hours, making sure that we are doing our prospecting. The fact of the matter is more people are actually picking up the phone. I had one person that hadn't been able to get in touch with someone for 2 years. The guy picked up the phone and they had a 50-minute conversation. So we're telling our clients, let's make sure we pivot a little bit, but let's focus on what we can do during these challenging times. All I know is that, I'm not visiting with anybody, but I'm getting a lot accomplished.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And Ellen?
Well, so, what's interesting for Robinhood, we've always been virtual during the month, and then we get together once a month. And that getting together has always been the high point for the group. And there was a lot of concern at first that, what happens if we don't get together in person? And how are you supposed to invest in an entrepreneur if you don't meet them face to face, right? And we've always been hyper focused on location and all those kind of things. With COVID and with being completely virtual, it's made our meetings really challenging because there's 60 people, in our group. But on the other hand, nobody's fussing about having to drive into the city and, I can't get there on time and where's the parking and, all that kind of stuff. So we actually have really good attendance. We've learned how to invest in companies without meeting the CEO in person. And the other interesting thing is because, just like Lisa, you were saying you were listening to a lot of podcasts. We've been creating a lot of content, a lot of training for our members that we wouldn't normally be able to do because it meant getting 30 people in to, get training on a certain topic. So we have a whole education plan we've been creating for our members to get them up to speed on different industries or different parts of angel investing. We're creating an education plan for our portfolio companies so we can really add some value. We were never able to do that effectively before, or at least we weren't in the mindset of doing that effectively before. It was always focused on place. And so once you get out of focus on place and focus instead on how do we deliver information, the possibilities are endless.
And I like, you mentioned something there that I want to pick on a little bit, not pick on, but, dig deeper for, which is that, okay, you guys as the investors needed to get better at meeting on online altogether in the virtual medium, but this has to have impacted the way that you look at your prospective CEOs, right? The companies that you're considering for the portfolio, the way that they pitch to you. How has it influenced their pitches or their ability to connect with you?
Well, a pitch is a pitch. As long as they're, Zoom capable, they're okay. We've had a few. That's been an issue. But we're in the tech world, so most people are pretty good with that. I would say that there are a few things about the businesses that we're looking at differently. When we think about funding, you usually think about funding to a particular milestone. We now have to worry that the money that we are investing will take the entrepreneurs through like an 18-month cycle, which is longer than we used to worry about. We need to make sure that that they're getting enough money that they can stay in business for 18 months to get to that key milestone. So that's really interesting. So the entrepreneurs have to focus on what are they going to do in this time to hit the milestones. How are they going to overcome some of the difficulties about not being able to see customers directly or having employees who are scattered? And a lot of our portfolio companies have actually had to pivot. And so we've been working with the companies on thinking through their pivot. I can't talk about all of the things that they're doing right now, but it's been really interesting, the changes that the companies are making. I can tell you one, Simply Good Jars, their business model was to sell these wonderful salads in vending machines in offices, in large buildings, right? Well, no one's in those large buildings now, right? So they had to pivot. And so that meant changing the product, getting away from the vending model, although, there could be use for vending in, senior living homes or big apartment complexes and things like that. But they've now been marketing toward some of the big grocery chains, for example. It's a really different model, very, very different model, different buyer, different delivery model, all those kinds of things. But they've done it. They've done extremely well doing it. But so you have to have a really agile CEO. So that's the other thing we're looking at is how agile is the CEO?
Yes. Yeah. And that pivot, I think, has become the word of the year.
Sorry. I have friends who make fun of me for the
lingo,
but
no, if anything, it's the opposite. It's that, in all the training, I've been doing a lot of training on Zoom lately about how to make sure that you're projecting confidence, presence, and having influence on camera, because regardless of your role, you now need to be able to do that. Whether or not you liked being able to seeing yourself on camera, whether or not you felt weird about it or knew how to do it well, it didn't matter how you were with it 6 months ago. Now it's not a choice. You're on Zoom and you cannot just hit the button, whatever platform it is. You can't just hit the on button and say, okay, it's good enough, because good enough doesn't cut it. Good enough is a C-.
Mm-hmm.
C- doesn't get you anywhere. So, and it's not just about, in a lot of my trainings, I originally was referring to it as a social Darwinism or economic Darwinism. Can you evolve and the survival of the fittest? But I realized evolution is not really the right analogy, because that implies a slow change over time. And this is pivoting on a dime. It was like yesterday, this was your revenue. Today, 97% of it evaporated. What are you going to do? And it is really just that. So I think pivot is an incredibly important word. I don't think it's cliche. I don't think it's overused. It's used to the extent that it's still relevant, which is mission critical every day. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And I want to also mention to everybody else out there, I'm seeing more people joining the conversation. So for those of you who are out there and listening to us, please do give us some love, hit the like or the heart, or depending on if you're on YouTube or on Facebook. Please show us that you're listening and that you're enjoying it. Take this time, and again, this is the one time that we do encourage multitasking. Feel free to go onto iTunes and subscribe to the podcast so that you can hear this kind of wisdom coming from all of my guests week after week. Ellen was on episode 2 and Lisa was on episode 14. There's lots of other great insights to be gleaned as well. So get in there and subscribe. Be sure to rate and review the podcast as well. And most importantly, while you're here and while we are on live, go to the chat. And if you've got questions that you'd like Ellen or Lisa to answer for you, this is your opportunity. Ask them directly, and I will make sure that everybody knows what it is, and we'll get you that information. So how about you, Lisa? Where's the pivot coming in?
Well, you know what, Ellen, you nailed it. It's often pivoting with who your target market is. So
Right.
I work with a lot of packaging companies. So they're going after food manufacturers. They're going after the markets that are still thriving. And so a lot of the times when you're talking about sales or business development, that's where the pivot comes in, is either what you're offering or who you're going after. And so just like Ellen said, each individual company is really having to revamp their 30, 60, 90-day game plan. And what I find is so many people in sales or business development kind of wing it every day. They check their voicemails, they check their emails, they see what's on their schedule, but there's no true rhyme or reason. And now more than ever, it's so critical that we make sure we maximize the use of our time. And so if anybody doesn't have that 30, 60, 90-day game plan, we just started the second half of the year, and we got to look at the numbers, and you got to figure out the numbers. They need to work on a piece of paper, and you got to know the right activities to get the results that you're looking for.
Are there some kinds of activities that are good, just rule of thumb activities for everybody?
Well, I think you got to think about what you're doing with your existing client base, because we got to make sure we hold on to as many clients as we can. Then we got to focus on how we could upsell and cross-sell and maximize opportunities within our clients. And then from there, we got to have our centers of influences, our network, the people that are referring us business. I mean, I had one gentleman, he referred 7 pieces of business last year to 7 CEOs that he knew that we could really drive the revenues. I mean, those are the kind of relationships we've got to be having. And then we've got to be doing our prospecting efforts, right? We've got to figure out how we're going to be doing our reach outs and how we do it in a very methodical way, and making sure that you've got your heavy hitter program. Who are your triples, home runs, and grand slams? How are you going to go after it in a methodical way with a specific cadence and with the proper messaging? What are you going to say if you're leaving a voicemail? What are you going to say if you actually get the person on the phone? How are you going to handle the objections? All that is what we really need to focus on, because we got to do the right number of the right activities right in order to achieve the results that we're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Ellen, any thoughts?
She said it beautifully.
Yes. So, okay, we just got a question coming in. So Holly is asking, what's one thing you can recommend to your entrepreneurs and business owners that they can begin doing right now to set themselves apart when they're presenting in a virtual environment?
Lisa, I'll let you take it first.
So I think it's a great question. And so the key is your most important metric is figuring out how you could get enough net new appointments with prospective clients, right? In addition, excuse me?
Tell people what net new means.
Oh, I'm sorry. So net new, if I have 4 appointments with the same company in 1 month, that's only one net new. All the follow-up appointments don't count, but one of your most important metrics when it comes to getting new business is working the numbers back and figuring out how many net new appointments you need to have, virtual appointments, and you could set virtual appointments with prospects. I mean, my clients are doing it. I'm doing it right now. So when we talk about setting yourself apart, stop trying to sell anybody anything. Try to figure out a way you could help them out. So it is about the questioning. It is about having a conversation. I'd love to, I help a lot of other companies in your industry. I'd love to find out more about the way you're doing this, whatever it might be, and see if I have some ideas that might be helpful. And then going to the alternative choice close. So as far as setting yourself apart, be a consultant as opposed to a salesperson, and that in and of itself will set you apart.
Yeah, I like that mindset difference between consulting versus sales.
Right. And I'm going to answer this in I guess a more tactical way in terms of when they get into the virtual room with us to present, what can they do to set themselves apart? I think more, Zoom calls are exhausting. Our meetings are 3 hours long. So when an entrepreneur comes into the room to present, they've got to really punch from not punch, but they've really got to get our attention from the very beginning, because it's exhausting. It's very different than being in a room and feeding off the energy in a room. So they've really got to come in with a lot of energy. They need to have their environment kind of set. They need to, not have to fiddle with, I got to find my presentation. Give me a minute to pull it up. All those things, because once they do that, then the people in our group are, they're starting to multitask and stuff, right? So they've got to have everything set, ready to go, come in with a high level of energy, a lot of great eye contact, stick to the time frame that we give them. And it's interesting that the Q&A, it's interesting if you're in a large room and you're feeding off people. There's a little more grace when your answer's too long, but when you're on a Zoom call, that answer has to be pithy. I'll go back to my pithy word, right? You got to be pithy. You got to get quick answers to questions. So I think those are some of the things that an entrepreneur has to do to set themselves apart.
And just to piggyback on that, I think of, Shark Tank, right? Those presenters that come in, they grab your attention right away. They've got that certain energy level. And the other thing is they're prepared, right? They've done it so many times that they're prepared for any questions that you guys might provide to them. Mm-hmm. They're prepared with all their numbers. They know it like the back of their hand, right? And I find a lot of times people are just winging things, right? And especially in your world, Ellen, they can't be winging things. But even in the sales world, you've got to prepare. And you've got to prepare so that when you do it, you've already done it a bunch of times. I always say in my training, for everybody to sign their name with their non-dominant hand and then sign it with their dominant hand and see if we could get those two signatures to match up. If I said I was going to pay you $1 million to match up those signatures, you would practice over and over and over until you got it. Well, that's what they've got to do. And that's one clear way to differentiate yourself from other people, is make sure when you're doing any presenting that you're fully prepared.
Mm-hmm. And one similarity between, Lisa would probably use the word objections, right? Overcoming objections. We talk about de-risking. So, in the sales world, you have to think about what are all the objections that, that a buyer would come up with. In our world, it's what are all the risks that an investor is going to worry about. And so if you can list out ahead of the presentation, here's all the risks that someone might think about, and here's how we're going to mitigate that risk. You can't get rid of the risk, because that's a whole thing about a startup, right? It's filled with risk. But if you can talk about, we understand that this is a risk, and here's how we're going to mitigate that risk, that projects confidence, and that makes us much more comfortable with the presenter.
No, the great distinctions. I think those are the kinds of things that people, if you tend to think that, well, I'm not in that world, so I don't have to worry about this. No, you probably do have an equivalent construct. You just need to think about it in different terms. So everybody has pushback they're going to receive, even if it's just about talking to your boss about something, or trying to convince a peer to work with you on something. If you're trying to pitch, if you're trying to persuade, you're trying to influence, you're always going to hear the, yeah, but what about? So whether you're calling it a risk that you need to mitigate, whether you're calling it an objection that you need to overcome, whether you're calling it a naysayers who you need to charm, it doesn't really matter. The idea is you have to think in terms of what is their biggest concern, and then how do you address it proactively? How are you prepared, to use Lisa's term, to engage in that conversation? And I think, Lisa, you mentioned something else that's really important, which is that the idea of you can't just wing it. And I hear a lot of objection when we talk about preparing, because I do a lot of work with people on public speaking and presentation and pitching and all those kinds of things. And frequently, people will say, well, I don't like to rehearse a lot because I don't want to, I don't like to memorize. I don't like to feel scripted and do whatever else. And I'm going, you're looking at this as a binary black or white. It's not, it's a continuum. Being prepared is a range. Practicing and going over your material until you're comfortable with it, those are all things you want to be really solid in. Winging it is not the opposite, is the opposite of scripting, and both of them, frankly, are bad. Because if you're scripting and you forget what you're going to say, you're off the rails. Or if someone interrupts you and asks a question, you're doomed because you don't remember how to get back to where you were, et cetera. So no, scripting for the most part, maybe once in a blue moon. If you're doing a TED Talk, okay, you script it because you basically have to. That's the rules. But otherwise, most of it should not be scripted. But you do want to be extemporaneous. You do want to be spontaneous. You do want to allow your personality to come out and speak freely. But it still needs to be polished. It needs to be honed. It needs to be practiced. It can't be just free associating and thinking, thinking out loud. Nobody wants to go on that journey with you. Stream of consciousness journey is not something that's going to hold people's attention. At that point, you're wasting your time because you don't even know what it is that you want to do yet. So that's not something that's going to be helpful. But making sure that people are really prepared. I mean, there's stories that I've told when I'm doing presentations. I've told them so many times that it's probably pretty close to verbatim as I tell them again and again, but they're not memorized, right? I didn't write them out and then work on it. I just played with it and practiced it. It's changed and evolved to an extent, but for the most part, I can do it in my sleep. So that's what we want to really look at is how can you be prepared so that it seems smooth, but isn't necessarily memorized per se. Okay, and let's see, we've got another question coming in here. Let's see, let's start with Bill McDonald. Scott, has there been any changes in we've got two here, standard slide deck?
Yeah, for the most part, it's the same. We are seeing people focusing more on the milestones and how they're going to get through get through this period. And there are some some companies have had a slide deck about how we've pivoted through COVID or what's changed in our business model during this time period. We had a business plan competition at Temple, and we actually told all the competitors to actually have a slide, a proactive slide about how their company would survive through COVID. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, I would imagine that would be one of the most pressing questions for investors is, what you put together, it looks great if we ever get out of this mess. And in the world we used to live in, that might have worked. We don't know what the world's going to look like once we get, God willing, past this whole quarantine, social distancing, whatever stage that we're in. But
well, that's the other thing, Laura. It's interesting. There are some companies that are, I hate to say benefiting, but are benefiting from COVID, right? Like ed tech companies, for example.
Oh yeah.
But then the question is, okay, so we need this new technology at this very moment in time. But what happens when COVID's over? Will we still need this? And how are they going to embed it in people's needs? And so that's an interesting question that gets asked now that, may not have gotten asked before.
Sure. Back to your point about scale, they may have this huge need right now for ed tech, and every kid, every student, anybody really has only one means of primary learning, and that's through the computer and whatever platform they've got that they're working with. And while I think there will be, I keep saying that this is the new normal. This is not just until COVID is over with regard to Zoom and being good on video and being charismatic and being able to engage and being effective on video, being able to lead through video is going to be far more common because, as you said, Ellen, look, we can get together now. We don't have to drive 2 hours in each direction. We don't have to worry about parking. We don't have to take 6 hours out of our day for a 2-hour meeting in order to do it. So, those kinds of things are going to be, I think this is here to stay, but maybe the scale or the scope is different. So when kids can finally go back to school in full time, suddenly there going to be a massive decrease in the need? How are you going to be one of the companies that survives that dip in the desperation need for this kind of platform? What's going to change?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so, Laura, even your business has pivoted a lot through this time. I know you've run a number of different sessions on how to be successful on Zoom. That was probably not the first and foremost part of your practice prior to this. So it was fun kind of watching you pivot during this.
It has been, and that's been my pivot. It started out as people were going, oh my gosh, what do I do? And hot mess as soon as the camera turned on. And it started out for me with just a LinkedIn post. I gave sort of 5 little tips. Here's a few things you can do. And there was a good response to that. And then that turned into question. And lo and behold, that's been my primary, like a 2-hour training. Lisa will be doing that tomorrow for Business Development University. We've got over 100 people registered for the training, and really excited about it to work with you and to work with your with your clients and with your peers, your groups. So doing that solid training on, it's not enough just to be you, but on video, right? You have to actually be better on video than you would be in person, because otherwise, Ellen, you brought up the M word, multitasking. And I've decided that the new definition of the word multitask is to pay attention to everything except you. Because you've got your phones there, and you've got your email and a different browser tab, and you've got this, got that. And basically anything else, if you start to lose somebody's attention when you're presenting, they have way too many other toys and interests and pressures at their disposal that are just a click away. Their hand's already on the mouse to just say, well, that's the 4-letter word, I'll just look at this. That's not really multitasking. I'm just going to check my messages. Let me just shoot off this email. At which point, whoever is presenting becomes Charlie Brown's teacher in the background. Wah, 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 wah. You're lost. Somebody may be physically present on the call, but that's where the attendance and the engagement ends.
Well, I had the pleasure of teaching. Pleasure, yes, but oh my gosh, a 3-day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 8 hours a day, graduate level course on angel investing. And the group was terrific. But our original design had way too much talking heads. And I think towards the end of the first day, I asked the group, how are we doing? And they're like, it's too much talking. And so we had to really adjust for the next 2 days to do a whole lot more. And, I know better, and yet still, we had to really adjust to make it much more engaging for them, because there's so many toys that people can play with during a class.
So what did you do?
What?
How to make it more engaging? What did you do? How big was the class, by the way?
We had 20 students. Okay. Oh, so we did a couple things. We got a panel of angel investors to come on and talk about angel investing. And I got a couple of, we pulled some Robinhood case studies out of a hat, and we said, here's a company that without giving too much information, here's a company that we're looking at. Would you, and then we said, go off and work in your group for an hour. What questions would you ask this entrepreneur? What do you need to know in order to know if you want to invest or not? And it really improved the class dramatically. But that was, we dropped a couple case studies and a couple of, lectures and added more of that stuff in. And luckily we were, if you know your topic, you can do that. But that was challenging, 24 hours over a weekend.
That is a long time to be even in person over a weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 8 hours a day, face to face in a classroom altogether. Yeah. You still have to take a lot of stretch breaks, possibly more so. But nevertheless, that's fun. So you did breakout rooms? Were you on Zoom or some other?
Oh, yeah, we were on Zoom. We had breakout rooms, and but yeah. So we did a lot of that. We tried to make it as real as possible. And luckily we had a lot of interesting, companies that either come through Temple or had come through Robinhood that we could, just give a brief snippet on. without sharing any secrets about the company that they wouldn't want us to share. And then they got the real world experience of thinking through, what do I need to know in order to invest in this company?
And that's really critical, is to engage your audience, whether you're teaching a class, whether you're running a meeting, whether you're pitching, to be able to engage in a way that is not just be engaging per se, but actively do something that makes them participate, whether it's Q&A or an analysis or you name it, to have people share something. You have to keep them physically present and mentally present in it, which is, of course, why I'm inviting everybody else out there. If you're listening in, whether you're on YouTube or you're on Facebook, ask questions. This is your opportunity to engage directly with podcast guests who you otherwise would only be able to listen to a little bit more passively. So if you've got any questions, any curiosities, feel free. And again, the one kind of multitasking that we are encouraging during this live stream today is, by all means, feel free to go to iTunes. Or if you are not on an Apple product, of course, you can go to my website, which is speakingtoinfluence.com/podcast. You can subscribe there, but also Stitcher and Omni and what's the other one? There's a whole bunch. Basically, any platform out there that does podcasts is Spotify. That's a popular one as well, where you can subscribe to the podcast, but in particular on iTunes to rate and review along with the subscribe and download. So please do take the time to do that and share with your friends as well. So let's see, Lisa, did you want to add anything to the engagement piece? I mean, in sales, how do you engage the audience?
Well, I want to answer the question regarding the slide deck. So Ellen spoke about the slide deck in reference to companies pitching the angel investors. But when it comes to slide decks, when we're doing presentations in the sales process, the difference with COVID is I'm seeing the presentations, the slide decks are much shorter, right? Because you don't want somebody just focusing on the screen. When you spoke about multitasking, unless you're engaging them. So a lot of the times when I've been doing virtual trainings, I'm not even having a slide deck. Or I'm minimizing the slide deck so that we could engage more, right? And so I'm saying, to answer, I believe it was Bill's question, is, when we're doing the slide decks, make them a lot shorter and really engage more with the folks. Because when we're doing presentations, if it's just a one-way presentation, we're not necessarily getting many yeses along the way. We're not understanding buying signals. We're not able to uncover hidden objections. So it's even more important, especially when someone new comes into the sales process. Oftentimes, if we miss one individual or don't interact with one individual, they could put the kibosh on the whole entire sale. So we've got to make sure that whenever we are doing something via Zoom and presenting via Zoom, that we're even more engaging, because like you said, they could easily turn off when in person, they can't necessarily leave the room.
Mm-hmm. And I think the other piece is, and this goes back to checking in with people, in a room, if you've lost people, if they don't get what you're saying, you can look around the room, you can see some glazed eyes and know that your point didn't get across or they didn't get it. In a virtual world, again, Robinhood has 60 people, and you better not be going back and forth and looking at the pictures. And a lot of people even turn their video off. So you actually have to ask you actually have to check in and ask specific questions to people. Does this make sense? Or what questions do you have? And I think, if I were going back to Holly's question, what would I suggest that an entrepreneur do when they're presenting in a virtual environment? I would make sure that I don't get technical until I know that people really understand what I'm talking about. And you need to use more metaphors, because you're not going to know if you've lost your audience. You're just not going to know.
And that's one of the things that I've been in the training, we'll talk about it tomorrow, Lisa, is the idea that when you are trying to engage with your audience virtually, you can't use rhetorical questions. They just don't work. And we think we're engaging because we're asking questions, but rhetorical questions are by far the most useless tool, especially when you've got screen after screen of a dozen or 20 faces at a time, to say something like, okay, I'm finished explaining this piece to you, everybody good? Yeah, we all right? Any questions? Nope. Because everybody else will just sit there talking to a room full of cats. They'll all stare at you, but you can't tell if they're actually looking at you or if they're just looking at their email, but it's in the same place as you were because they changed screens a while ago. So, how do we otherwise engage the people, and what do we do actively to get a specific response to indicate, yes, we're good. No, there's no questions. I do have a question, or whatever it happens to be, but the rhetorical question is your enemy in these kinds of contexts because you think you're engaging and then you're just choosing to interpret silence to mean what you want it to mean, which is that everybody's good and there's no questions. And there's absolutely no guarantee that that's what that silence actually indicates. It could mean that they're all just comatose. So.
And you know what? I think one of the hardest things we deal with as presenters or facilitating Zoom meetings is when people turn the cameras off.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the times when I'm doing a training session, we're kind of setting some rules of engagement and some expectations up front that, keep your camera on, do your best to interact, like all that kind of stuff. Because I run every Friday, I run sales success peer groups, and we've had anywhere from 75 people to 30 people, anywhere in between, but just managing the group and making sure that everybody could ask questions. I have them raise their hand like this, and then it's trying to keep the flow going so that it's interactive yet interesting. And then when some people might ramble on, just bringing them back in. But I find that, with your audience, if you could say, let's everybody, at least have our videos on, because otherwise it's so difficult.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Lisa, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So, sales question. So what happens when you're talking to a prospective, customer or client, and they say, we can't think about this until there's too much unknowable. We can't think about this until X. How do you bring them back into thinking about it?
I would say something like, I totally understand how you feel. In fact, a lot of the clients that we've been working with felt the same exact way. But what they realized was that the companies that are focusing on what they can do right now are going to be the ones that are going to be in a much better situation when things start turning around. So it probably makes sense for us to at least have a preliminary conversation. That, you just use that word, preliminary conversation. That way, when things start turning around, you're already set to go instead of starting at the, ground zero at that time. Be proactive now, so when things start turning around, you can take advantage. And, of course, in all this, we're making sure I used a technique just now called feel, felt, found, which is a very popular objection handling technique. But the key is making sure you're talking about benefit statements. So not only, let's have a preliminary conversation right now, but make sure you're throwing in how you're able to help some other clients that might be similar to theirs.
So there's two things in there, Lisa, that I want to go back to and have you just reinforce, because I think they're really good gold nuggets for people to take away and use right away. And one made Ellen's eyebrows go up. So I want to make sure that anybody who was out there didn't miss it as it was running by. So the one was about the preliminary conversation, right? What's the objection? Can you repeat that one more time? Explain what that is.
So when somebody's trying to put you off, and I don't know what's happening right now, there's so much uncertainty, I can't even think about this right now. You go with I understand how you feel. In fact, a lot of my clients, and you could name drop if appropriate, felt the same exact way. But what they found, when you get to the found, that's where you go into your benefit statements. And then you could say, right after you handle the objection, you got to go for the close for the appointment. So like I said, I'm just looking for a 15-minute preliminary conversation or a half-hour preliminary conversation. Sometimes I'll even use the word executive overview. And I might even say something like this. This might make some people feel a little less comfortable. But most people in your position at least want to know what else is available out there. Even if you're happy with the way you're doing things right now, at least the best time to look is when you're totally happy. So like I said, I'm just looking for a preliminary conversation, and then you go into that.
That's great. And you actually went into the second one also, which is that the 3 F's, right? The feel, felt, found. So that's the empathy statement that you're trying to use to connect with them to overcome those objections, which is that I understand how you feel now. Many people I know felt, or people I'm working with felt that way, past tense, but no longer is there. But what they found is this was the transition point where they went from feeling that to feeling something else and thus doing something else, i.e. working with us. What they found was, and then value statement, value statement, value statement.
Exactly. And by the way, it is a very old technique. So some people know this technique. So we could change the wording around. We could say something like, I understand where you're coming from. In fact, when I originally spoke to Ba, they said something very similar. But what they realized was it's the same concept. But if you constantly think about the 3 F's and you have stories, so if somebody says, I'm not sure about what's going on, there's so much uncertainty, have a story about one of your other prospects or clients that originally felt that way, and now you could name drop, get to the benefit statements. So if somebody says, it's too uncertain a time. Well, I understand where you're coming from. My client felt the same exact way, but you know what? We focused on what he can do instead of what he can't do. And he's up 17% over the past quarter from the previous quarter during COVID times. So like I said, and then you go for the close.
That's great. Again, if anybody else out there has some questions, you've got about 5 minutes left to jump in and ask if you've got questions for Lisa or for Ellen. This is your last opportunity. We've got about a little over 5 more minutes to continue with the discussion. We've got a bunch of people who are watching. I can't tell if they're on Facebook, if they are on YouTube. So we'll have to check out later on and see where the larger engagement is, where our competition is from platform to platform. This is fun for me to learn how to play with all these new toys as well. So let's see, Ellen, or either one of you, frankly, but looking ahead, what's next? What's next for Robinhood Ventures, or for you, for that matter?
Oh, well, this is so new for me right now but it just feels so creative, trying to apply all these tools and figure out how to work in this world. It's and being able to create some of the education that we never have had, or, creating repositories of tools, that's been really exciting. I think for Robinhood, one of the things that we're focused on right now is how do we build out our pipeline to be more diverse? So that's a really key focus for us right now.
Industry, diverse in CEOs, diverse in what kind of ways diverse?
Industry to some extent, but no, I'm really talking about, how do we ensure that we are, venture capital and angel investing has not been, I'm just trying to get the right language, has not been as open to people of color.
Okay.
A very, very small percentage of venture capital goes to people of color. Very little goes to women. We had been working for a long time, on opening the doors to women, and there were a lot of different initiatives that we were a part of, and we were already starting to go down a path of how do we make sure that we are looking at people of color, but the last few months, you can't not focus on it. And so, and you have to really rethink, you have to really rethink everything, how you do everything, what your pipelines look like, who you're partnered with. You have to rethink everything for that.
That's great. Sometimes we need that wake up call. So if one of the silver linings of it all is that now it's the wake up, and people are now being able to increase the diversity in all those channels that you just mentioned. And, at least there's value that has come out of all of that. So that's terrific. How about you, Lisa?
So the most exciting thing for me is virtual motivational speeches. So many companies, they don't have their president's club this year. They're not having their kickoffs, but the salespeople need a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of motivation, and some tidbits so that they could be more successful. So recently I did a motivational speech for a local bank, and they sold out of the first two and had to do 3 separate sessions, the top 10 secrets of success for business development for bankers. So one of my goals for this year is to get to as many companies and help as many salespeople with something that's really going to inspire them, motivate them, and give them some key takeaways that they could implement right away to help them be more successful.
That's great. And how are you finding those opportunities?
The old-fashioned way. I do a lot of speaking engagements, so a lot of them come to me that way. I have my centers of influences, and just like I tell all my clients, we do a fair share of prospecting as well, using LinkedIn, calling up people, using your book of lists, using a multi-pronged approach with multiple touches to get into the companies that you're looking to get into.
That's great. Have you guys found any new toys, any new tech toys? I mean, I'm playing today with StreamYard so that we can connect through YouTube Live as well as Facebook Live at the same time, both of which are also new for me. I've never done live streaming on either. I keep trying to get into LinkedIn Live and did all my application work months and months ago, and they're like, yeah, we'll talk to you later, Laura. So hopefully one of these days they'll turn around and let me into the club. But other than that, this is my new toy for today. Have you guys found any fun new tech toys?
For me, it's not a tech toy, but the thing that's been my big pleasure during this time. There's a company called Bloombox, and they deliver fresh plants to your house. If you live in the city, so because the garden centers were closed, and if you live in the city, you have to drive out to the suburbs to get flowers. I can go online, I can pick out the flowers I want, and they're not the dead root stuff that comes, through the mail. I mean, these are live, beautiful flowers from Lancaster that come to your house, and my garden has never looked as good. And there's a tech thing called Picture This, and you can take a picture of it, and it'll tell you, it'll tell you what kind of plant it is. It'll tell you how to take care of the plant. It'll tell you if it's a weed. It'll tell you if it's diseased and how to take care of that disease. I'm having the best time with my garden.
Oh, that's amazing. That might be, picture this, so I can take a picture of a plant and it'll tell me how to take care of it. So there is hope for me that I'm not going to kill every piece of vegetation that comes across the path. Because I've always said I think God made me a good cook because he knew plant life was going to die in my hands anyway. But might as well give its life for a good cause. But people give me flowers as gifts, and I'm going, what did this poor thing ever do to you? Why would you torture it by giving it to me to take care of it? But maybe there's hope for me after all. Okay, so picture this. That sounds like fun. Lisa?
Well, I got to tell you, this is one of my new toys.
Oh, yay.
An actual microphone, because...
Oh, you just hit the mute button, Lisa. So,
of course, as I was holding it. So this microphone is really critical because if you're looking to tape any of your sessions, the computer microphone will not allow you to get the audio level that you want to be able to properly repurpose it. So whenever I'm doing a podcast, I found to have the external speaker improves the quality. So it's something easy to get. It plugs right into your USB and it makes a huge difference.
Yeah,
I gotta get one. Look, Laura's been telling me I need one.
Actually, yours, as far as internal mics, Ellen, yours is pretty good. But for the most part, it is the one. Lighting and sound are really essential. They're the fundamentals. When you're on video all the time, you don't know what tech anybody else is going to be listening with, but you don't want to be sounding like this while you're trying to pitch $1 million venture or whatever it happens to be. Mm-hmm. Or you want to look like you're in the witness protection program with, in the shadows and nobody can see your face. You can't, again, the 3 C's that I teach and everything that I do are the ability to command the room, now command the camera or command the screen, connect with the audience and close the deal. And if people can't see your face or hear your voice, well, you just rip the rug right out from under yourself. You cannot do any of those 3. So upgrading the mic, and upgrading your lights as necessary so people can see your face is really just biblical rule number one at that point. That's the
I
commandment.
got to upgrade the chair next. I'm sitting a lot more than I'm used to sitting.
Yes, a good chair and a good little backrest. That's been far more important. Chairs are all made for tall people, and you can't tell on the screen, which is part of why I like being on video. Now you can't tell how tall I am or how tall I'm not, as the case might be. So getting a good lumbar support is going to be something that is also a very, not so much a nice to have, but really a need to have after a while. So with that, we are just about at the bottom or the top of the hour, as the case may be. Any final thoughts?
Ellen, do you want me to?
This is where I run out. I don't know.
Feel free for everybody else to type in. So Rachel said thank you. Holly said thank you.
Oh, hey, Rachel.
Chimed in.
So I guess my final thought, in my line of work, I learned this a long time ago. Make sure you're doing the right number of the right activities right? So have your game plan, know your activities, know the corresponding results, have it all work out on a piece of paper or bits and bytes on your computer, and then trust the process, follow the plan, track your results, and make modifications accordingly.
You make it sound so easy, Lisa. That's the whole point, right?
It really is, actually.
That's why you're going to call Lisa. When you need it to be easy, not just sound easy, she will show you how to do it. So, any final thoughts, Ellen?
Nah, again, Lisa nailed it. I always learn something from her. So thank you, Lisa.
And vice versa. I mean, I have always looked up to you, respected you, been so impressed by your accomplishments, both of you. So it's been a thrill for me to be here with both of you for the last hour.
This is fun.
This is why I knew that this would be good chemistry, to bring the two of you here today and just to talk about all this stuff. So once again, for everybody else out there, thank you so much for joining us live today on Speaking to Influence Live. Please do go to iTunes, subscribe, rate, review, download all of the episodes. We've got new ones coming out every week. We'll be doing more of these live as well, which are always a lot of fun. And please spread the word. Be sure to let everybody else know what incredible value there is to listen to. And as Lisa mentioned, look, we're not going out and we don't have the social life that we used to have. So there's plenty of podcast time. When you're tired of Netflix, you're tired of Amazon Prime Video, whatever else it is, go to iTunes and start listening to more podcasts and start with Speaking to Influence. I'm Dr. Laura Sicola, host. Everybody else, thank you so much for joining me today. And we will look forward to speaking with you again soon. We'll put this all, you'll see it on video, on archive footage on YouTube, as well as on Facebook and on my website as well. So everybody have a terrific night.
All right. Bye, everybody.